just always dreamed of, going and living out in the wilderness. But I knew if I did that, I'd just die,
Yeah.
I was raised in the city, you'd just die,
I guess what people don't realize that living out in the bush is a full-time job.
Transportation's a big deal. If it costs you $300 or $400 every time you want to go to town and back, that can get expensive.
It's nearly impossible to cut all your ties with civilization, and especially here in Alaska, because doggone it, the weather is really brutal. It's a brutal environment, It got so cold this winter I couldn't peel my logs after I milled them, so I had to take them into my shop over there and thaw them out overnight just to get the bark off. These straps are the greatest. I use them for everything.
One thing I love about Alaska is that you have to respect it, because you can die.
People call these a gin pole, and pick it up and, do all this work and move the logs around without hurting myself, which is real important.
You manage the risks and you learn and you get self-reliant.
But when you're flying, you need to be on your game all the time, and especially in the bush, especially off airport. Mountaintops, tundra, gravel bars, landing the float plane in the rivers with debris coming down. In the early 70s, there was a big push of people that lived out in the woods and built their own log cabin.
The first thing I did when I came out here to build this cabin was to form some kind of a crude shelter.
The laws, the way they are, you can't just walk out here and just do whatever you want to do anymore.
This is where my family pictures and my children are hanging on the wall. For me, it's not a recreational process or a cabin. It was my home.
You need some subsidy. You need the flour, peanut butter, salt, things like that. You can subsidize very heavily. You can pick the fiddlehead ferns in the season and pick your berries and put your fish up and your moose up and dig a root cellar, and you can subsidize very heavily. And
if you're going to live like they did in the 1800s, life was hard.
And I knew Alaska. Alaska was the last frontier. It's kind of the end of the earth, and it still is.
When I first got here, I got out into some wild places and was doing some things, and I remember when the thought first came to me that you could die out here and nobody would know right now.
I lived 40 air miles out, and the only way in and out was to fly. Not having an airplane, it was just a matter of economics to start flying airplanes.
For me, I came out here, I found a piece of property, bought it, built a cabin, and was in this cabin within 6 weeks of the time that I paid for it. Refrigerator flown in, wood stove, all your vitals, all your clothing, and this was actually my home. This is where I came to.
Well, everybody can't do that. You can't just have 100 people on a lake all of a sudden decide they want to build a log cabin. There's no more trees left. Everyone gets a moose, they've killed all the moose.
So I just got done with a successful hunt here. With some fresh snow, it was a little easier to get a hold of one of these varmints to trap. Been a while too since I had one. Yeah, I'm gonna be checking on my wood supplies for the rest of the winter, rest of the season. It's just about the time where it's a balance between rationing what you have left to get through the rest of the remaining winter. And I'm gonna have to be getting out and trying to get some wood here. Running a bit dangerously low. Not at all uncommon to come back to your cabin after a couple of hours and have your smoked sausage froze as hard as a rock. I'll show you how we take care of it. This is exactly how you take care of this situation. Problem at hand. Split an axe, stump, sausage. That's how you do it. This spring, which is coming out of the side of the hill, provides me with water year-round, both in summer and winter. If it's 40 below, this spring is running. Regardless of how much snow there is, it's just, you got to pile around here. Sometimes just getting over here and getting it's the problem.
Yeah. It's so nice to be long days again now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to try to do a double whammy here.
Here we are.
You know, I tried to call you a few times, and I don't know, for one reason or another, his phone doesn't work. So I actually had to bushwhack out about 1,000,000 miles to find this guy. my old friend Bob.
Down the river too.
Yeah, the hard way.
The risky part of the river, the part I never go on.
Yeah.
He came right down the middle of it.
Yeah, I'm lucky if I see you once a year or twice a year, isn't it?
Yeah, that's about it.
I mean, I might see you in town on occasion, but usually you're chasing the girls around or something.
Oh no, I don't do much of that anymore.
I would put that in there. Without civilization, I mean, do you think it's honestly possible I mean, you've been out here, so I've known you, what, 5 years now?
Yeah. I think it's nearly impossible to cut all your ties with civilization. And especially here in Alaska, because doggone it, the weather is really brutal. It's a brutal environment, you know. Living out in the bush out here is really nice, and I think probably one of the things I didn't understand about this whole process, and I think that a lot of people don't grasp, is how hard it is to get here. And a big part of the beauty of being here is the fact that it is very difficult to get here. And so then if you want to build yourself a place out here, as I have done, it gets to be a real logistical challenge of how am I going to get my building supplies or my food, or how am I going to get myself here? So in a lot of places, like in this place here, there's a network of trails, so to speak, out in the bush, and some of the trails are only usable in wintertime when there's snow and ice on the ground, and the other trails there can be used seasonally to some degree. Some seasons the trails are so mushy, the earth is so soft that the trails, you can't transport over them until they dry out. Like at breakup time, when the frost is coming out of the ground, the trails get so soft, any kind of machinery or walking over it, it turns into oatmeal and it's impossible to travel. So yeah, getting yourself and your stuff out here is quite the challenge. And so the year that I started building this place, I hauled my freight out here. I home built a special freighter trailer that I could haul behind a four-wheeler, and I would load it up with lumber and haul it out here, and this went on for weeks. I just basically would go to town, buy a load of lumber, load it onto my freight trailer, hook it up to the four-wheeler, and drag it out here, unload, and just it takes me quite a while to get here. So and because of the season, which was June, is daylight almost 24 hours a day. So I got to where I wasn't sleeping normal. I was just sleeping at sleeping places. So when I got back to town, I would sleep a little bit. It didn't matter if it was 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning. And same thing here. My sleeping became more determined when I got to a destination. And so point being is I was on the trail at all different hours. So one night I get back to the trailhead and I load up a load, and by the time I even leave the parking lot, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. Not a problem, it's not going to get terribly dark, but it happens to be a rainy day and it's pouring down rain. So I head out on the trail and it's my trail to get here with a load like that is about a 2.5-hour trip. So I head down the trail in the dark, I take off, and it gets progressively darker. Well, there's stretches on the trail where the bushes are really close to the trail. And then there's stretches on the trail where the woods is more open and you can see for quite a distance in any direction. But in this one particular stretch of the trail, it's all just alder bushes really close, like right here. You're traveling down the trail and the alder bushes are just right at your arm's reach right here. And I had a bear encounter, and I don't know how to describe this except to say that I'm bouncing along down the trail, hauling about 2,000 pounds of lumber, and I'm making quite a bit of noise coming down the trail. So I'm going along, and I don't know how to describe this except that I just, from my right-hand side off in this direction somewheres, and it's almost pitch black dark, pouring down rain, I don't know how to describe it except to say I could feel this energy source over there. And I think sometimes when you spend a lot of time out in the bush, you're not attuned to TVs or radios or conversing with other people, and your senses become more heightened and alert and attuned to different things. And That's why I say I felt this energy source coming off at me from this direction over here. And it was just a strange feeling. I could feel this energy. But then I heard sounds, and over and above the sound of my four-wheeler and this freight trailer banging and clanging down the road, I could hear twigs popping, bushes wiggling, stuff coming at me. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? And I had a hat on that had ear flaps. And because it was raining and kind of cold, even in the summer, I had those ear flaps down, and they covered almost completely covered my ear. And so I feel this energy source coming at me. I can hear this thing coming at me. And I went to turn my head to look to see what was coming at me. And before I could get my head completely turned to that direction, this giant bear, and he had to be like less than 6 feet away, roared at me. And he was so close and so loud that I could feel his hot breath inside this ear, even though there was the ear flap from that hat covering that ear. And at that point, I thought, I don't need to look any further in that direction. I need to get out of here. So so to speak, I put the pedal to the metal as much as you can possibly do with a six-wheeler and a load of freight, and just floored it and bounced off down the trail. And of course, as fast as you can go with a machine like that on a trail that rough is at very best 20 miles an hour, and I did every bit of that. And I know a bear can run probably 30 or 40 miles an hour. And I thought, well, this is a pretty lame effort to get away, but it's all I got. And I am so scared, and my adrenaline is pumping so hard that finally after 50 or 60 feet, I realized I'm still alive. He must have given up the chase because he would have caught me by now. And so, yeah, needless to say, the rest of the trip back to my camp was a total fear factor thing. Every little bush that wiggled, I thought was another bear coming at me. And
You want a caribou hot dog?
I just ate, actually.
Did you? I got jalapeno and cheese, cheddar cheese.
And where'd they come from then?
Buddy of mine.
Indian River?
Buddy of mine shot it, and they were made at Indian River. Yeah, this is a toaster.
You can tell it's an aged stove too. An old hot point, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. This is all mostly Walter's personality in here. You know.
Yeah.
He built it almost 38 years ago now. I think it was
the cabin.
73.
Yeah.
I think they built it in August.
Yeah.
Late in the season.
Yeah.
And
Walt is an old timer out here. He kind of staked the property, didn't he?
yeah, they did. They opened the entry in the 70s, and they stomped out here. And what was kind of funny was they were. He had it all planned out on maps to go out to Clear Creek there and get a piece of property out there. And the rain was just pouring down. And they came along this ridge, and his wife said, "That's it, right here. We're stopping. This is it." And it was totally overcast and everything. And so they pitched the tent, and rained all night. And they got up in the morning. When they got up in the morning, they looked over the lake there, and all three, Denali, Hunter, and Forker, just sitting on top of the trees there.
So this
So
is
it's
already
just-
decided.
She had already decided.
Yeah.
But it was a good pick, and they would have missed it if they had kept going. So anyway, lots of water. Got 80 acres of water out there. And so in the summer, since it's a beaver pond, you got to boil it. And this is just snow. There's always lots of water in the winter because you got snow.
Yeah.
What do you use?
Water from the spring.
Oh, that's right. You're always
Yeah.
going out there to the spring.
Yeah. I like that. That's run for 40 years for Danny, and it's something I thought I would just for the heck of it continue to use. It's just easier if you got a spout of water coming out, you know.
Now I think there's spring coming out here, but it's not flowing quite the the way it is over there. So I don't know if there's a way to make it do that or not. I know I keep a rain barrel out there, and so if there's enough rain, then there's you know, collected off of the roof.
Right.
And I don't drink anything but what's been boiled, with the exception of maybe snow water. I've had Giardia once, and it's no fun.
Yeah. So let me ask you something, Scott. I've known you now for 2 years, probably.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, probably 2 years.
Yeah, 2 winters.
Yeah, in my cabin, and you had just bought in this cabin out from Walt, who was the originator, homesteader,
Yeah.
of this particular piece.
People were always like, you know, you crazy? You're moving where? Why? Isn't it dark 6 months out of the year? You know, and
Which is almost true.
yeah. Well, you know, that means it's light 6 months out of the year too.
Yeah.
Though, but and you ever been there? Nope. No, just always dreamed of, you know, going and living out in the wilderness, you know, that kind of a thing. So I got to figuring out, but I knew if I did that, I'd just die. You know,
Yeah.
I was raised in the city. You know, you just die. You know, didn't know anything about living. Wasn't even raised on a farm. So, but so I finally figured out that, you know, I could move up to one of the cities up there, and I'd be close to the wilderness, and then I could kind of figure this thing out. And lo and behold, I landed a job over the phone, and was up, you know, a few weeks to a couple months later. And then I started coming out here to this cabin with my next door neighbor, which was Walter. They had moved into town after so long. And, you know, I came up for the last 13 years, just, you know, as often as possible out here. And his story was that they came in the 70s and staked out that 5 acres and built this from the logs that they cut on the property in a roundabout. And he and his wife built it by hand. And they lived out here about 8 years, about 4 years continuous, and you know, off and on. They were surveyors for the pipeline. So he kept coming up out here, and I'd always tell him, if you ever decide to sell this place, I'm going to be the first person you talk to. Never thinking that he'd do it, you know.
Right.
And one day they did. They decided they were moving to Colorado, and they offered it to me. So I think we had kind of kindred spirits, you know.
Yeah.
And
Kind
he wanted to see the vision go on. If it's standing another 5 years, I'll be fortunate, but so I have to build a replacement. But what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to take as much of this and the personality of this and build it into the new place. That way it kind of kind of flows. Eventually, to do it exactly the way I want to do it, what I would have is I would have some solar panels, but you can't count on them all the time. We had 21 days straight rain once, and you just can't count on the sun, even though you got the long days.
Yeah.
So you really have to have a number of things. You got to have solar. If you got to have multiple backups. So I'd have a wind turbine eventually. There we go.
Whoa, there it was.
I think that one's done. You got to have I would have a wind turbine, have a generator, and a battery bank. And if I had flowing water, I'd put in some kind of turbine like that, but none of this water is flowing enough to do that. If I lived near a tidal area, I would definitely hook up something that would kind of harness the tide, because that's twice a day, every day, and if the tide stops flowing, we don't need electricity anymore.
Right.
Yeah, So I think these are done.
The process in which I charge my batteries is kind of twofold. The solar panels here charge for the duration of the summer when I can. This car charger charges the rest. So during the winter months, I use a generator hooked up through here and run it into the cabin and thus charge my batteries. It's a pretty simple thing to try to figure out. You just got to trace wires into the cabin through this access hole that I put in. This is the wire to the solar panel that's going to the batteries into the control box. I've got various extension cords running in and out for access for electricity as I need it. This is actually the cord here going to the generator that's backed by my storage building down here. So everything I have is primarily right here, and it's very accessible, and it's functioned extremely well for 5 years for me, and couldn't have planned it any better than what I've done. Okay, so this particular contraption here is to lift your logs and such?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm like 60 years old, so my back is not real good at being a brute anymore. So I build these things to save my back, and then this little strap here just goes around the front so it doesn't come detached from the log. Now you got the log at the balance point, and it skis so freely on those snow machine skis. You take this log and move it anywhere you want, just like that. The log weighs a minimum of 220 pounds at this point, and I can go anywhere with it. It got so cold this winter I couldn't peel my logs after I milled them, so I had to take them into my shop over there and thaw them out overnight just to get the bark off. And people call these a gin pole, and I could just whip it over here like this. Supposing I wanted to work on this one and put it on my sawhorse over there, I just do this. And pick it up and, do all this work and move the logs around without hurting myself. More what I think about is if you get hurt, you got a problem.
Yeah.
You got a real problem. So you're always thinking about ways to do things without hurting yourself and being careful.
Yeah. I've hurt myself before. Like this. I can't even see what I'm doing here.
If you're going to live like they did in the 1800s, life was hard. One thing I love about Alaska is that you have to respect it, because you can die. God forbid they put, railings, safety railings up on everything and make everything quote unquote, safe. You can never be perfectly safe. And when I first got here, I got out into some wild places and was doing some things. And I remember when the thought first came to me that you could die out here and nobody would know right now. So there's something about respecting it. I don't want to live a life without risk, but you don't want to take wild risks. Wild risks will kill you. But life without any kind of risk is just not living. So. You manage the risks and you learn and you get self-reliant and you get more confidence because you get stuck out in the overflow out there and you figure out how to get out, or a friend comes by and saves your butt. When things happen, you got to think. I got to think now. I got to be smart, because a couple of wrong decisions could make an uncomfortable situation become a life-threatening one. And when you manage those risks and move forward with, you gain confidence, So that's, I like that. I like that about Alaska.
Yeah.
You mill them, you cut them.
This is where I milled my logs, and I'd take a whole full round log with the bark and everything on it, and I figured out before I started that my logs I needed were 14 foot was a good number if I cut everything at 14 foot.
Yeah.
And my trees around here that I had to work with weren't very big, so maybe I'll drag a log over here and throw it in there just so you can kind of see the basic premise of how the deal works. Is supposing these straps are the greatest. I use them for everything. They make good handles. And then I would have the log in here with the best side up, and I would take and center it up in the jig, and then run some screws in here with a battery drill so the log can no longer roll around or go anywhere. It's just completely locked in there. And then I take this board and slide it over the top of that bracket like that. And
Holds that in place then, kind of.
yep, holds that in place. And I take a little square or plumb or something and move this back and forth till it's dead plumb with the board that's down below, and stick a couple screws in there to hold it. So you got the 2 aluminum guide plates, and they can rub on these straight edge boards, and that way I can cut an absolutely perfectly straight line with this chainsaw and not hit the board and nick it up. It just guides through like this, and when I get all the way down to the other end, I just turn around and come back the other way, and I can cut a log that has 2 perfectly flat sides.
Wow.
And they just come out. They're absolutely parallel and straight and perfect. The end result looks like this, They're just perfectly flat and straight on 3 sides. They're just prime pieces of wood. And to build that homemade sawmill probably cost me at the very most $200.
Yeah.
And basically that was some plywood, a little bit of steel, and a couple chunks of aluminum. And it just worked really good.
One thing on a solar panel that people aren't probably aware of, that it's actually got to be turned so as to track the sun. It's got to be, I found, within 10 degrees of where the sun is to get maximum electricity production. And I know this because I plugged in a couple of wires on a light bulb and aimed it towards the sun. And as you veer it off, of course, away from the directional rays of the sun, you lose that electricity. So it's always important for me to change this about 3 times during the day to get maximum access.
This thing worked out so good. I was expecting I'd have a lot of trouble getting the logs up on the wall, but so far, I just been picking them up off that wagon and stacking them up. Traditional style framing with a 6-inch wall with a R21 fiberglass insulation in it. And now that I'm putting the logs on, I got the thermal mass of the logs going with it. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. I've got, when I get done, it'll be quite well insulated, you know.
So would you do this all over again?
Would I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't trade this part of my life off for nothing.
So what do you feel
Being out here has been one of the best things I've ever done in my life.
Tell me, start out, here's some of the pros and cons.
Being out here?
Yeah.
I can't think of too many cons. Really, it's not easy to get here and set yourself up because, you know, you can't just drive your pickup truck out here with a load of wood. I mean, if you got lots of money, you can have your wood brought in with a helicopter. Other than that, some people make good snow trails and then haul their wood out on the snow trails. Otherwise, you got to go over the dirt trails, which I did. So I brought all my wood out over dirt trails, and it's brutal. You know, there's a certain amount of trails that exist before you get here, but usually to get to your actual piece of land, you got to cut a certain amount of trail on your own, and it's tough work, you know. And they're not smooth at all. It's real rough. And so just getting your stuff out here is quite an ordeal.
In this rugged terrain, a person's got to know what he's doing. It's a matter of life or death if you screw up. We're on our way. We've got to be getting close to some pockets of fir here. A day like this, you can read the tail of the tape or the snow. Part of life up in the bush of Alaska is having a trap line. And if you're on this trap line, you're not getting anything. Every few days, you're going to be spending more time and gas for a snow machine than what it's worth. Get off my hand feathers. Look at these tracks here. There's a good number of weasel tracks that are just plowing right through here. So this, with a few feathers out here as attractors, this will surely catch their attention. And I see I have nothing here as of today, and I'm on a good trail system here, as you can see. We've got to get going here and check these other sets here. I've got another one actually up the way, right up the ridge right here. So head up there and hopefully try to check out some tracks in this fresh snow. Day like this, you can read the tail of the tape or the snow, if it's what it is. Yeah, you can see that there's a perfect line racing through this particular corridor, and the weasel's bound to come across this box here. So here we are, pine martenset. You can see the size of his paws and how his feet are shaped much like a snowshoe. And they're actually walking on top of the snow, where they get along pretty easy. Person out in the Alaska bush has to know precisely his target animal so he can correctly go after his chosen prey. Okay, so I'm gonna try to beat the trenches, try to go back up to the main trail, which may not be easy because I believe I am stuck pretty good. Okay. Oh. Up the trenches. In the trenches. Whoa, that was way down there. Feel very honored to be able to be out in the forest like this. With nobody around telling you what to do and how to do it. Person knows the haunts of the particular animal he's trapping. It makes tracking them and understanding where to set traps a whole lot easier. Such as now this right here is a squirrel track, not to mistake it with a weasel track. These are a little more a three point, a little bit wider apart, and they make a scuff mark when they scoot through the snow, usually. So it's easy to try to think you're following a weasel when in fact you're just watching a squirrel and he's tricking you. Let's see if we can find some more. There's a otter slide. The otters are coming from behind the lake here. There's a stream and coming down, coming underneath the snowpack. Nice, you can see them where they went down right in here and they're underneath here. And slide along, you can tell by their slides, they push themselves along like a toboggan. They drop in underneath the ice on the lake. And you can see them, they come across right here. And they're underneath the ice somewhere now. Where I get my water. You can see it's still running. Nice and safe. Pretty incredible to have these springs run wild underneath the hillsides here, providing us with nice clean drinking water. Stays at about 38 degrees year round. You can see how much snow we've had here, you know, as far as the depth. It's crazy. It's good to have that fresh water if you can get over to it. There you go.
That's nice. That gives not a tremendous amount of light. You know that old saying, lather, rinse, repeat, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do nothing until I'm tired of it, and then I do something until I get tired of doing that, and then I do nothing again. And when you, and the something, do something, boils down to, you know, just the things that you have to do. You know, you have to have some wood to burn. You have to clean up. You have to take care of some things. You know, you got to make sure you have water. We got a ton of blueberries on the property, and we missed them last year. It was a great year for berries. It was wet, and they were growing, and they were plump. And when we finally got out, said, okay, this is the weekend we're going to pick them. Most of them had fallen by, you know, a week or two before, so we just missed it. So.
Just ransacked. The bears just put an end to this cabin, and looks like they just got chased out, the people who used to live here. Books still on the shelves. It's as if they just walked out the door and left all their belongings behind. That kind of says it all. Hand in hand, together we stand on the threshold of a dream. Wow. It's just like they got up and walked out one day. Never looked back. I bet it's safe to say that this cabin's seen better days. This cabin, like the rest of them that we've seen, probably had a real nice family in it at one time or another. The weight of the snow of this roof collapsed this whole thing. A lot of these poor cabins out here, you know, I just go from one homestead to another, everywhere you go. And it was somebody's dream at one point, and they put in a lot of time, money, and effort into finding it. And that's why, for me, I came out here, you know, I found a piece of property, bought it, built a cabin, and was in this cabin within 6 weeks of the time that I paid for it. Had you know, refrigerator flown in, your wood stove, all your vitals, all your clothing, and this was actually my home. This is where I came to. This is where my family pictures and my children are hanging on the wall. For me, it's not a recreational process or a cabin. It was my home.
Well, put this stove in, almost 40 years old, so it's
Still working.
Mm-hmm. Old steel drum. And oh, this was a fallen spruce, fell across the trail.
You're gonna just bring it in, or you're gonna split it too?
I've got to split some so that the wood box is full before I leave, so it's full when I come back. I still get a kick out of looking down at the roof.
Yeah.
With all this snow. who lived out here full time a long time ago, the trappers and all that, they still had to do some commerce.
Yeah.
They still needed money, and they still, even if it was, they lived out in the mountains and all that, and they still had to buy a gun barrel,
There's some things that had to come from the civilized world.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Now, if you want to live as a Indian or a native or that type of a thing, you can try to do that. That's hard living. They don't even live like that anymore. So,
Yeah.
The laws, the way they are, you can't just walk out here and just do whatever you want to do anymore.
Yeah.
Even
in Alaska.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think they're even more.
So if you wanted to live like a native, you would probably be breaking some law somewhere.
Yeah.
Because what they did is they shot, they hunted what was opportune.
Yeah.
Not during hunting season.
Yeah.
They did it during opportune season. Fished when the fish were running and hunted when the caribou came through and when they needed meat and so on and so forth. Dried it when and you could try to do that kind of thing. I think you can to an extent, but not like it was.
Trade, yeah.
I mean, even if you get back to the simplest things where you're like trading and that type of a thing, then I've got something that you need and you've got something that I need, and I produce one thing and you produce another. Everybody's got skills. That.
Yeah.
You still got to have that.
Yeah.
So, all right. I didn't see it, but Walter had a bear. Had a bear in the cabin once, made a mess. So
Yeah, so that's what those marks are all about on the cabin door.
yeah,
Just pawed. Walt told me that there was a black bear and its cub went through that door right there, that window.
yeah,
Went inside, pulled everything out.
yeah. That was the one that got in there and tore things apart.
Tore the whole cabin.
Made a mess. This helps.
So where are you from originally then?
Originally from Michigan.
Michigan, okay.
Detroit area.
Were you born in Michigan?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And just always dreamed of the North Country, Alaska, British Columbia. Since I like staying in the United States, Alaska was the choice. So
That's where you
thought
ended
about
up.
it forever, and I would think I'd like to visit for a week and maybe stay for a month and live there for a year. Was kind of my staged goals, and I kind of overshot that and ended up just moving out. I've been here about 13 years, but I just figured, they I didn't want to wait until I was too old, so I was 33 when I did it. Why wait until I'm 65 and latch into a big salmon and have a heart attack,
Yeah.
Do it younger, at least. I would have loved to have done it sooner, but that wasn't how things. Let's put it this way: I could have not done it at all if I'd have followed suit with what everybody else, the kind of things that they said, and you're going where?
Yeah.
Why?
You can't do that.
What?
That's what they told me. You're not really going.
No,
You're not really going.
Yeah.
I said, "Oh yeah, I am. My house is sold. I'm out of here. I'm driving my car, and I'll see you in 5 years."
Why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
You're crazy. Yeah. Well, it's been argued.
You can see that everybody's dreams have shattered. Look at all these old cabins. It's a dying shame to think that just not even in your lifetime, during the time when I was in high school, that all these people came up here with dreams, building their cabin in the wilderness on a lake out in the middle of nowhere, and to think that most of them are abandoned, a lot of them burnt down, and there's no use for them, you know. They just realize that they're just on the outer fringes of reality, and that you've actually got to have some kind of commerce, some kind of money exchange, you know, whether you're making things or selling it or going to town and working. And it's a huge inconvenience to be traveling from town out here. It's nothing but a pain in the butt. You know, if you use a four-wheeler, they're nothing fun about a four-wheeler. They're just a rough-ass ride. I have one, I hate it, and you know, you spend 2 hours just one way, getting your butt all beat up and your back, you know, broke, that you learn to either stay in town and get everything you need at once and to try to weather it out as long as you can out here. But then if you have any way to have to try to make money, you just can't do it.
If I could spend 1 year, a whole full season, you know, turn of the seasons.
In the bush?
Yeah. You know, I would just like to experience what it's like to just
Have enough money.
Yeah, you'd have to have enough money to do it,
Yeah.
because you're going to need, you know, to stock supplies. Even the people that came up for the gold rush and stuff like that, I mean, they didn't do it on a wing and a prayer. They had to come up with a certain amount of money to come up with supplies and equipment and all that kind of stuff. If you don't, you know, and you try to get out into the bush, you're gonna die.
Yeah, you get run out.
Yeah.
Starvation.
Yeah.
Economics.
Yeah.
You know, sanity.
Yeah.
Runs you out.
Walter said one time he had been out here for maybe 2 years straight, something like that, and he said, I was starting to get a little bushy.
Yeah.
so, you know.
I guess what people don't realize, that living out in the bush is a full-time job. You know, between hauling water, making sure your electrical system's functioning right, working right, and knowing mechanically how to run everything and how to do it correctly is another thing. There's a lot of people that are coming out into the bush that don't know diddly. They don't know beans from bed bugs. And they're getting into trouble because they don't know what a wrench is, what a metric size wrench is, how to pull apart a carburetor, clean a fuel system, you know, hook up electrical things, how to shoot a gun properly, how to know the danger signs when a bear's coming down a trail and heading straight into you. There's too many dangers out here, and you know, person just comes out here by themselves, they're as good as toast. You know, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, you know. Either you know what you're gonna do, or you don't. Or you come in a group, and hopefully somebody in the group between all of you know what you're doing. I'll see you when I see you. I'll see you in the movies, maybe. Scott. I forgot, this is Scott.
Yeah.
Scott, I don't even know Scott. Who's Scott?
Yeah.
My neighbor. Okay.
All right, man.
Because all the bears that hang around here in the summertime, and the reason there's so many bears here in the summertime is because of all the salmon in the river. And because of that, I usually, typically when I'm traveling about, I carry a 44 Magnum pistol and a shoulder holster right here. So to start the generator, of course, you're pulling on it like you would a lawnmower. And in the process, you're jerking around in this 44 Magnum revolver I got carried under my armpits, just swinging and flopping around. So this generator still won't start, so I just take the thing off. I take the 44 Magnum revolver off and lay it down there at my feet just to unencumber myself. And I'm still trying to start this generator, just cursing it. And I hear a noise behind me. And what's behind me is the trail coming up the hill from the river. So my first thought was, oh, it'll be a moose. Cool. I always like to see moose. So my first thought when I hear this noise coming up the trail is moose. And then my next thought was, no, there's so many moose or bears around here this time of year. It's not going to be a moose. It's going to be a bear. So I turned around and peeked over the hill, peeked down the trail over the hill to see where the bear was, and I couldn't see any bears. So I thought, okay, I need to get to my gun. And I always leave my gun hanging on the tree. If it's not on my body, it's hanging on the tree. So I thought, they always say when you see a bear, you're not supposed to run away from the bear, you're supposed to walk or be gentle. So when I had looked down the hill, I didn't see the bear. And I thought, well, I'll take a couple of slow steps away from the hill to get out of the bear's sight. And then I'm going to break into a dead run over to the tree where I always store my gun. So that's exactly what I did. I took 3 big, giant, slow steps out of sight, and then I took off to a run to the tree to grab my gun. And when I get to the tree, my gun's not there. And the reason it's not there is because I had it in the shoulder holster, which I laid down back at the generator and forgot all about. So now I get to the tree and I look and there's no gun there. There's just a little .22 rifle, which is virtually worthless. And I grab it anyway. And I turn around to see where the bears are. And lo and behold, it's not one bear. It's a giant sow and 2 giant cubs. Her cubs were almost as big as she was. So I thought, oh my God. And the sow was looking at me and she was excited and she's going just huffing like that. And she's so excited that there's white froth foam just spitting out of her mouth. And I thought, oh man, this is not good. She's like brought her cubs up here to eat something and discovered me in her normal eating place. And so I thought, my God, what am I going to do now? I'm totally helpless. I've got an aggravated sow and 2 cubs and nothing here to protect me. No gun, no nothing. So no building to get into, nothing. So there happened to be a big pile of lumber there that was stacked up about 5 feet or 6 feet off the ground. And they always say you're supposed to appear as big as you can around the bears. Like if you're by yourself, it's better if you appear big, like put your arms over your hand and slowly wave them like this. So I remembered that and I jumped up on that lumber pile and stood up as tall as I could and waved my arms over my hands slowly like this, trying to look big. And the sow and the 2 cubs the sow and 1 cub was still over there at the head of the trail. And she's still as aggravated as ever. She's just huffing like that. And the 1 cub of hers came right to me. He came and walked right up to the lumber pile and put his front paws up on the lumber pile like he was going to crawl up on the lumber pile and check me out. And I just thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm in trouble now. So the only thing I could think of is that statistically they say that about 99% of the time these bear encounters turn out okay. The bear goes away and leaves you alone and you go back to your normal activities. And that's all I had going for me was the statistics. And so that's all I could think of. I mean, I was totally helpless, just standing there being challenged by this young adolescent teenager, so to speak, cub bear that was huge. And so finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the sow and the 1 timid cub took off through the woods and ran away. And the 1 cub that had challenged me, after she had left, he could hear, he was still looking at me, but he could hear she was leaving. And when she was about 200 yards away, then finally he decided he'd had enough and it's time to go join Mama and get on down the road. So eventually he left, and of course my heart was just pounding, so it was like it was going to burst right out of my chest. And I'm hopped up on adrenaline now. I'm on this adrenaline rush that's going to last for about a day. And that was my first real close encounter with the bears, and it was quite exciting.
You know, these are naturally occurring spring holes in this lake. It's spring fed, and thus there's a lot of dangers involved when trying to get through the snow machine. And my spring is across the lake where I get my water, so I gotta hoof pretty hard to. Now with this here, and this is all pretty much froze over. You can see fish swimming up here in here, but this is a spring hole that holds something. Very dangerous situation ahead of us. Just came across a pretty large cow moose up here, and I'm going to proceed with caution and hope we don't have a confrontation. When the snow is at these depths, they don't want to yield the trail very graciously. So anyway. You might have crossed off the trail right here, so I'm going to make a loop through the back way of my back trail, which is where I saw him before. So we'll just keep going and seeing. No, he's straight ahead of us. He's got done. He's ahead of us. If anybody asks me where I actually live, I just tell them Talkeetna, up at Chase. Chase is a historical location on the tracks. It's where, through this area here, there was actually a station house at this siding here on the railroad back in the 1920s. So it's actually a location that's historical for that reason. Plus, this building over here is the last building standing of what was a little community through here of station people that used to man the railroad. There's a giant spring where water just boils from the ground, and you have a pipe stuck in there. Clean drinking water during the construction of the railroad. Railroad workers would stop, and this is where they would get their fill of water on the train. So this location here is actually a siding. A siding is where primary train runs on one side of the tracks, and the other side is for the other trains to pull off. It's kind of a pull-off way station to wait to let the big guys go by. You know, down here you can see where the track splits, and that's why they call it a siding. It's where you get off the side of the road and let the big boys with the authority move on through. Hey, Spiker. This stretch of the Alaskan Railroad through this area here, through the valley, is about 60 miles into the pure wilderness.